Alright, and welcome to my channel. I am the Roadscaper, and today we're going to be painting Adelbern, this frosty polar bear from the Fur-Heroscape new expansion sets. Traditionally, this bear is represented more as a polar bear variety, white fur, frosty demeanor, etc. At this point, I've made a few videos on painting white fur, providing several different formulas on the process, and honestly wanted to showcase something different today. Adelbern, while having in-game synergy with the Frost Claws, also does bond very well with another unit in the game. The D&D unit, the Deathchasers of Thesk, who boast a very dark styling with black fur, mottled armor, and worn leather. I thought it'd be nice to bring some of those elements into our large cudgel bear here. We're going to mainly focus on how to make his black fur look a lot more engaging, touching on details of contrast and layering up a nice gradient to make the black appear more prominent. So firstly, I primed Adelbern in a solid black. Now, you may look at this and feel like the figure is already mostly complete at this point, but the figure lacks contrast and catching depth. Working with black is a delicate process, as too much of a lighter color like grays or whites will cause the overall hue of the model to look much brighter than intended. We're going to slowly layer shades brighter and then darken them back down to a desired point. That said, we're starting with the darkest shade, as I personally find it easier to work to bring colors brighter by adding highlights compared to the other way around. The first layer of paint after the primer dries, we're going to add some cool contrast with black blue from Pro Acryl. This color is a great way to slowly build up the midtones on the model. I worked my way around Adelbern using short movements on the brush to create a bit of texture on the fur. Try to avoid the deepest recesses where the shadows would exist. Be sure to keep the paint moderately thin so a bit of black underlayer shows through. And don't spend a lot of time on this process. It honestly doesn't need to be perfect. We're just mainly sketching in the values, and we'll be blending these together in later steps. Now we're going to repeat the similar process, do another pass over Adelbern with a mix of cool gray and a bit of the blue-black we used before. About a 50-50 ratio, where it's definitely a lighter transition. I'm using cool gray from Monuments with their new amp color line, which I'm enjoying, and we're just trying to focus on smaller surface area compared to the previous layer. Each step we're trying to focus on less and less area, ultimately creating that gradient to the brightest points. We're looking to highlight prominent raised surfaces and key focal points. This includes the knuckles, top curves of the arm, snout, tops of the ears, and raised areas of the feetsies. If you notice, I'm using the top part of my brush with a bit of water and thinned out paint, just to really help the paint application go a lot smoother. I'm trying to create a smooth blend, kind of pushing the colors further down to the previously applied layer, and having the raised surfaces be the most prominent with the brighter colors applied. After that intermediary layer, I used pure cool gray to increase the highlights further. We're effectively creating a gradient that will add a bit of subtlety to the final result. I use the dabbing motion, a process called stippling, to add a bit of texture and to more naturally blend the tones together. For added punch, you can use the front top of your brush to pick out some individual hairs on the fur. Alright, and after that step, let's break out the dry brush. Dry brushes are fluffy headed brushes that work especially well on catching the raised surfaces of models. I took the cool gray and mixed it with white blue. Now with other colors, models that appear black can have a sense of warmth associated with it. I'm going for a cool black to both match the Deathchasers a little bit better and to give it a subtle hint of Adelbern's polar origins. You'll want to remove the excess onto a paper towel until little paint comes off the brush and lightly go against the fur of the model. Make sure you keep the paint on a dry palette away from moisture, and your brush just has a small nominal amount of water on it, just enough to keep the paint from getting chalky. If you notice, I went a little strong on the dry brushing on the arm because I didn't remove enough of the paint beforehand. But thankfully there's a bit of grace in this process, and future steps will be able to hide this error and darken it down to the point where we want it. We're going to do a couple passes over the highest areas, covering less with each pass. When you dry brush, you can add multiple layers of that paint on the dry brush, just like if you're applying a normal paint application, ultimately bringing the color brighter and more prominent. We have essentially created a clear transition of colors and established consistent contrast. The next steps are going to focus on maintaining that contrast as we darken the overall values of the model. To achieve this, next we're going to grab some black transparent paint and thin it down. I use some acrylic medium, but you can also use water as needed, and thinly glaze it over the fur of the model. You may need to add an additional layer, but it's important to maintain that subtle color shift we've established. Essentially, this paint is naturally translucent, and we're adding a darkened filter over the model. This both blends the previous layers where they look smoother and flow together better, and gives the appearance of dark fur. As mentioned, painting black is about that balance. If you're too aggressive with the highlights, it no longer reads as black, and if you don't do enough, it really doesn't have any definition or shape. You want to pay special attention to the helmet area, as it has small right corners on the face, which is just kind of hard to get to. That's why I honestly recommend painting the armor afterwards if you're not confident in your brush control. That way you can easily cover up the mistakes you make. Also, the space where the arm meets the chest plate has a tendency for the paint to pool up, so be sure to spread around or use a large body brush to sap the excess paint off the model. Contrast paints or speed paints are naturally kind of viscous. They have this really easy free-flowing nature to them. You'll want to use your brush to guide where the paint flows, kind of directing it into the crevices and the surface area of the fur. Ultimately, I'm trying not to overwork the paint on the model and kind of let that free-flowing nature of it treat it more as a benefit than a hindrance, kind of guiding with the tip of my brush and leading into the cracks and crevices where I want it to settle. Now it takes a bit for this to dry, and after it does, you'll want to go through and bring up some areas of models that get a little bit too dark and that you want to further accentuate. Essentially, as I mentioned before, we're going back and forth till we get to that right balance. So we're going to grab some of that blue-black and just put it into those highest areas that we mentioned before. The snout, the ears, and like the raised knuckles on the hand are really great spots to focus on, as well as the outer curve of the forearm that's very prominent on the model. If you want, you can take that blue-gray we previously used and also pick out a few hairs on the arm and the backside just to really make it feel distinct and give it a bit of separation. And there you have it, essentially a very easy way to get some black fur that looks a bit better than just painting it pure black. As always, you can add more to this and kind of keep on adjusting the highlights and the shadows. Keep on doing this multiple passes if you so desire, kind of following this process. I went through and had finished up the details and added the glowing red eyes as well as some leather armor, and worked a little bit on the blood spatter on the killer mace. And it's a relatively simple process to get this all done. It took me less than an hour to kind of layer up this fur. It's nice, quick, and easy black fur, but honestly, there's not a lot of tutorials out there on the subject, so this is a great way that you can use for other models, whether it be wolves or anything with a fur coat. Is kind of an easy way to hack into the system and make use of the properties of paints. Now, I don't have my typical turnaround of this model because I did send this off to the legendary Fur-Heroscape, so let's see what he has to say about the final result.
You just get a much more menacing feel from Adelbern, and I love that.
Well, there you have it. I don't think I could have said it better myself. Adelbern is a great add to your army, really stands out, and is a great way to practice layering up black fur for future projects. Be sure to like and subscribe for future Fur-Heroscape and painting content, and leave a comment if you have any questions or if you'd like to see me paint any other figures. Thanks so much, and you all have a great day.